fumbled with my keys at the front door, my heart racing with excitement. The business trip to Chicago had ended 2 days early, and I couldn't wait to surprise Mark. We'd been married for 3 years, but lately, things had felt distant, cold. Maybe this surprise would reignite something between us. The house was unusually quiet as I slipped inside, dropping my luggage softly by the entrance. Mark's car was in the driveway, so he had to be home. I kicked off my heels and padded up the stairs in my stockings, a mischievous smile playing on my lips. That's when I heard it. Soft moaning coming from our bedroom. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself forward. Maybe Mark was just taking care of himself. We hadn't been intimate in weeks. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and what I saw through that crack destroyed me completely. Mark was there, all right, but he wasn't alone. Ashley, my gorgeous, blonde, supposedly loyal best friend Ashley, was straddling him, her perfect body moving rhythmically as she threw her head back in pleasure. Mark's hands gripped her hips possessively, the same way he used to touch me in the beginning of our relationship. I stood frozen, watching the two people I trusted most in the world betray me in the most intimate way possible. Ashley's long golden hair cascaded down her back as she moved, and Mark's face showed more passion than I'd seen from him in months. They looked so natural together, so right. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. How long had this been going on? How many times had Ashley sat in my kitchen, drinking my coffee and listening to me complain about my marriage, all while she was sleeping with my husband? I backed away slowly, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. But they were too lost in each other to notice anything else. I grabbed my purse and car keys, leaving my luggage behind, and fled. The autumn air bit at my skin as I sat in my car, shaking. I couldn't go back in there. I couldn't face them. Not yet. I needed to think, to process what I'd just seen. But first, I needed a drink. 20 minutes later, I found myself at O'Malley's, a dimly lit bar downtown that I'd never been to before. It seemed like the perfect place to disappear. The bartender took one look at my tear-stained face and wordlessly poured me a double whiskey. I was on my 3rd drink when he approached. "Excuse me, but you look like you could use some company." I looked up to find a man standing beside my bar stool, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with salt and pepper hair and the most striking green eyes I'd ever seen. He had to be in his early 40s, with the kind of confident presence that commanded attention. "I'm fine," I lied, taking another sip of whiskey. "Ryan Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "And you're clearly not fine, if you don't mind me saying so." Despite everything, I found myself shaking his hand. Lisa, beautiful name for a beautiful woman. His voice was smooth, cultured. Nothing like Mark's casual tone. "May I?" He gestured to the empty stool beside me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Ryan signaled the bartender and ordered a scotch, neat. Everything about him screamed sophistication, from his expensive watch to the way he carried himself. "So, Lisa," he said, turning those penetrating green eyes on me. What brings a lovely woman like you to a place like this on a Tuesday afternoon? Caught my husband cheating, I said bluntly. The alcohol making me bold. With my best friend. Ryan's expression darkened. I'm sorry, that's unforgivable. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. You sound like you speak from experience. My ex-wife had a particular talent for infidelity, he said, swirling his scotch. I discovered she'd been having affairs throughout our entire marriage. Multiple affairs. How did you handle it? A slow smile spread across his lips, not cruel, but knowing. I made sure she regretted it. The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. Not fear, but something else entirely. Intrigue. You're not what I expected to find in a dive bar, I said, studying his expensive clothes and confident demeanor. Neither are you. His eyes traveled over my business attire, lingering appreciatively. You're clearly intelligent, beautiful, successful. Your husband is an idiot. The compliment hit me like a physical touch. When was the last time Mark had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd really looked at me the way Ryan was looking at me now? Tell me about yourself, Lisa, Ryan said, leaning closer. What do you do? I'm a marketing director for a pharmaceutical company, I said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. I travel a lot for work. Maybe that's part of the problem. No, Ryan said firmly. The problem is that your husband doesn't appreciate what he has. A smart, driven woman who's dedicated to her career. That's incredibly attractive. His hand moved to cover mine on the bar, and I felt electricity shoot through me. His skin was warm, his touch gentle but confident. I should have pulled away, but I didn't want to. You deserve better, he said softly, his thumb stroking across my knuckles. You deserve someone who sees your worth. I stared into his eyes, feeling something I hadn't felt in so long, desired, wanted. Ryan was looking at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. And after what I'd witnessed today, I desperately needed that. I don't even know you, I whispered. Sometimes strangers see us more clearly than the people who claim to love us, Ryan replied, his voice low and intimate. I can see that you're hurting, but I can also see that you're strong, stronger than you know. His other hand came up to gently brush a strand of hair from my face, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. His fingers lingered on my cheek, and I felt my breath catch. What are you thinking about? He asked, his eyes never leaving mine. Revenge, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. Ryan's smile was slow and predatory. Now you're speaking my language. The air between us crackled with tension. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Smell his expensive cologne. See the way his eyes darkened as he looked at me. This was dangerous territory. But after what I'd seen today, I didn't care about being careful anymore. Tell me, Lisa, Ryan said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. How far are you willing to go to make them pay? His question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and promise. I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could go home, confront Mark and Ashley, try to salvage my broken marriage. Or I could stay here with this mysterious, magnetic man who was looking at me like I was everything he'd been searching for. For the first time in hours, I smiled. How far am I willing to go? I repeated his question, feeling something dangerous unfurl in my chest. I don't know yet, but I'm tired of being the good girl who gets walked all over. Ryan's eyes lit up with approval. That's what I wanted to hear. He glanced around the increasingly crowded bar, then back at me. You can't go home tonight, can you? At the thought of walking into that house, seeing their clothes scattered on my bedroom floor, made my stomach clench. No, I can't. Let me drive you to a hotel, he offered, his voice gentle but decisive. Somewhere nice. You deserve better than whatever cheap motel you might end up at on your own. I should have said no. Should have called a friend, gotten a ride to my sister's place. But the way Ryan was looking at me, like I mattered, like I was worth taking care of, I couldn't remember the last time Mark had looked at me that way. Okay, I whispered. Ryan's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine as he led me out of the bar. His car was exactly what I'd expected. A sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than my annual salary. He held the door open for me, and I caught another whiff of his cologne as I slid into the leather seat. The interior was immaculate, all polished wood and soft lighting. As Ryan started the engine, classical music filled the space, and I found myself relaxing for the first time all day. Tell me about your marriage, he said, as we pulled into traffic. His voice was careful, not pushy, just genuinely interested. I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. What's to tell? I thought we were happy. I thought Mark loved me. My voice cracked slightly. I spent 3 years trying to be the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, keeping the house spotless, supporting his career, even when it meant sacrificing my own dreams. What dreams? Ryan asked quietly. I'd almost forgotten I had any. I wanted to be a photographer, had a scholarship to art school, but Mark convinced me we needed the stability of my office job instead. The words tasted bitter. He said we'd have plenty of time for my hobbies later. Ryan's jaw tightened, and Ashley, my best friend since college, she was my maid of honor. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's been coming to our house for dinner every week for months. I thought she was being supportive after her divorce. Turns out, she was just scoping out my husband. We stopped at a red light, and Ryan turned to look at me fully. You know, none of this is your fault, right? The simple statement almost broke me. Then, why do I feel like it is? Because you're human. Because when someone betrays us, we look for what we did wrong, instead of accepting that they're just selfish people who don't deserve what they had. His words hit deeper than I expected. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. Ryan's smile was rueful. My ex-wife cheated on me with my business partner. Took me 2 years and a lot of therapy to realize that her choices said nothing about my worth as a husband. How long ago? 3 years. I threw myself into work after that. Built my company from the ground up, proved to myself that I was worth something. He glanced at me, but I forgot how to trust, how to let someone get close. At the hotel he'd chosen, was exactly as promised, elegant and expensive, with a marble lobby and crystal chandeliers. Ryan handled everything at the front desk, while I stood there feeling underdressed in my jeans and sweater. But when he returned with the key card, he looked at me like I was wearing a designer gown. "The bar here is supposed to be excellent," he said, "unless you'd rather go straight up to your room." But the thought of being alone with my thoughts terrified me. A drink sounds perfect. The hotel bar was intimate and dimly lit, with plush velvet banquettes and soft jazz playing in the background. Ryan ordered a bottle of wine, something French and probably outrageously expensive, and we settled into a corner booth. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To revenge," I countered, and he laughed. A rich sound that made warmth spread through my chest. As the wine worked its magic, our conversation became more personal. Ryan told me about growing up poor, about working 3 jobs to put himself through business school. I found myself sharing stories about my childhood, my dreams, things I hadn't talked about in years. "You're remarkable, Lisa," he said suddenly, his hand coming to rest on my thigh. The touch was light, respectful, but it sent electricity shooting through me. "Your husband is an idiot." "I don't feel remarkable," I admitted. "I feel invisible, like I disappeared somewhere along the way and became just Mark's wife." Ryan's hand tightened slightly on my leg. "I see you," he said, his voice low and intense. "I see an intelligent, beautiful woman who deserves so much more than she's been given." The way he was looking at me made my breath catch. When had Mark stopped looking at me like that? Had he ever looked at me like that? The music shifted to something slower, more romantic, and Ryan stood up, extending his hand. "Dance with me." I let him lead me to the small dance floor, his arm sliding around my waist as he pulled me close. We moved together slowly, my body fitting perfectly against his. I could feel the solid strength of his chest, the warmth of his breath against my hair. "This is dangerous," I whispered. "The best things usually are," he replied, his lips brushing against my ear. I tilted my head back to look at him, and the intensity in his dark eyes made my knees weak. This was crazy. I'd known this man for less than 4 hours, and here I was, pressed against him on a dance floor, feeling more alive than I had in. "Ryan," I started, but he shook his head. "Don't overthink it, Lisa. Just feel. When's the last time you did something just because it felt good?" I couldn't remember. Everything in my marriage had been calculated, planned, appropriate. But this felt like stepping off a cliff and trusting that I could fly. As the song ended, Ryan's hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb tracing along my jawline. "You're so beautiful," he murmured. "How could anyone not see that?" I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt desired, wanted, worthy of someone's attention and care. Subscribe for more dramatic confessions like this one. When I opened my eyes, Ryan was still looking at me with that same intensity, and I realized I was in serious trouble. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This mysterious, sophisticated man was making me feel things I'd forgotten I was capable of feeling, and I wanted more. Ryan's hand was still cupping my cheek, and I could feel myself melting under his gaze. The jazz music from the hotel lounge drifted up through the open balcony doors of his suite, creating a soundtrack to what felt like the most pivotal moment of my life. "Lisa," he said softly, "I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, it's your choice. No pressure, no expectations." His consideration made my heart ache. When had Mark ever been so thoughtful? When had he ever looked at me like I was precious? "I know," I whispered, my fingers finding the silk of his tie. "Ryan, I haven't felt like this in so long. Like I'm actually alive." He stepped closer, his other hand settling on my waist. "You deserve to feel alive, Lisa. You deserve to feel everything." The moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast everything in silver, making the moment feel dreamlike. Ryan's expensive cologne mixed with the faint scent of the French wine we'd shared, creating an intoxicating atmosphere. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "Of what?" "Of how much I want this. Of how much I want you." The confession tumbled out before I could stop it. Ryan's thumb traced my lower lip, sending shivers down my spine. "Then stop being scared. Stop thinking about what you should do, and just be." When his lips finally met mine, it was like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when I responded by pulling him closer, it deepened into something that made my toes curl. My wedding ring caught the moonlight as I reached up to thread my fingers through his dark hair, and for a moment, guilt tried to surface. But Ryan's hands were framing my face so tenderly, kissing me like I was something precious, and the guilt was swept away by a tide of need I'd forgotten I could feel. "You're trembling," he murmured against my lips. "I know," I breathed. "It's been so long since someone touched me like this, like I matter." Ryan pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes intense. "You more than matter, Lisa. You're extraordinary." No one had ever called me extraordinary. Certainly not Mark, who'd made me feel invisible for years. Ryan's hands moved to my shoulders, his fingers tracing the delicate straps of my dress. "Are you sure about this?" Instead of answering with words, I reached for his tie, slowly unknotting the expensive silk. His breath caught as the fabric slid through my fingers, and I felt a rush of feminine power I'd forgotten I possessed. "I've never done anything like this," I whispered as I worked on the buttons of his shirt. "Neither have I," he said, surprising me. "Not like this. Not with someone who matters." His shirt fell away, revealing a chest that spoke of regular workouts and careful attention to his body. I ran my hands over the warm skin, marveling at how different this felt from the perfunctory intimacy I'd known with Mark. Ryan's hands found the zipper of my dress, and he paused. "Last chance to change your mind." "I don't want to change my mind," I said, meaning it completely. "I want to feel alive, Ryan. I want to feel wanted." The dress pooled at my feet like black silk water, and Ryan's sharp intake of breath made me feel beautiful in a way forgotten was possible. His hands skimmed over my skin with reverence, as if I were made of something precious. "God, Lisa," he breathed, "you're perfect." When he lifted me onto the king-size bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets, I felt like I was floating. Everything about this moment was the opposite of my marriage: tender instead of rushed, passionate instead of obligatory, meaningful instead of empty. Ryan's touch was everywhere: gentle fingers tracing my collarbone, warm lips following the path his hands had taken, whispered words of appreciation that made my heart soar. He took his time, making me feel cherished in a way that brought tears to my eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing my tears. "Nothing's wrong," I whispered. "Everything's finally right." When we finally came together, it was with an intensity that took my breath away. Ryan moved with me like we'd been dancing this dance for years, his hands tangled in my hair, my name a prayer on his lips. I felt connected to him in a way I'd never experienced, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the silk sheets, Ryan traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows like fallen stars, and I felt transformed. "I should feel guilty," I said quietly, "but you don't." His voice was carefully neutral. "I should, but no. I feel like I've been sleepwalking for 5 years, and you just woke me up." I turned to face him, studying his profile in the moonlight. "Is that terrible?" "What's terrible is that you've been made to feel like you don't deserve this," he said, his arm tightening around me. "You deserve to be cherished, Lisa. You deserve passion and connection, and someone who sees how incredible you are." I pressed my face against his chest, breathing in his scent. "What happens now?" "Now we see where this goes," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "If you want to, I want to," I said without hesitation. "Ryan, tonight changed everything for me." He tilted my chin up, so I had to meet his eyes. "For me too." We talked until dawn, sharing stories about our dreams, our disappointments, our hopes for the future. I told him about my abandoned art career, how Mark had convinced me it was impractical. Ryan told me about the gallery he'd been thinking of opening, how he'd always wanted to support emerging artists. "You should paint again," he said, his fingers combing through my hair. "I'd love to see your work." "It's been so long," I protested. "So start again. Start fresh." His smile was encouraging. "I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself with what you're capable of." As the first rays of sunlight crept across the bed, Ryan reached for his phone from the nightstand. "Give me your number," he said. "I want to see you again, Lisa. Soon." I hesitated for just a moment, thinking about what I was signing up for. Then I thought about Mark and Ashley, about years of feeling invisible and unwanted, and I rattled off my number. Ryan programmed it into his contacts under Lisa Beautiful. When he showed me the screen, I blushed. "I have a meeting at 10, he said reluctantly, glancing at his expensive watch on the nightstand. "But I'll call you later today. We'll figure out when we can see each other again." I nodded, suddenly shy now that daylight was creeping in. I should probably go home. Face the music. Will you be okay? The concern in his voice was genuine. I will be now, I said, meaning it. Ryan, thank you for making me feel human again. He kissed me softly, and I could taste our future in that kiss. Secret meetings, stolen moments, the intoxicating thrill of being truly desired. As I gathered my clothes, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. My hair was tousled, my lips were swollen from Ryan's kisses, and there was a glow to my skin I hadn't seen in years. I looked alive. I looked wanted. I looked like a woman who knew her own worth. For the first time in my marriage, I had a secret that was mine alone. And despite the complexity of what lay ahead, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. This was just the beginning. The drive home felt like traveling between two different worlds. In Ryan's Mercedes, wrapped in his expensive cologne, and the memory of his touch, I was this confident, desired woman. But as I pulled into my driveway in my modest Honda, reality crashed back. Mark's car was there. Of course it was. Where else would he be at 7 in the morning after destroying our marriage? I sat in the car for a moment, checking myself in the rearview mirror. My hair looked like I'd spent the night being thoroughly kissed, which I had. I ran my fingers through it, trying to tame the evidence of my night with Ryan. The house was quiet when I slipped inside. Mark was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and looking like he'd slept as poorly as he deserved. When he saw me, guilt flashed across his face so obviously it was almost comical. Lisa, where were you? I was worried sick. The lies came so easily to him. I stayed at Sarah's, I said smoothly, hanging my purse on the hook by the door. I needed space to think after our fight. He looked relieved that I was attributing my absence to our argument about the dishes, not to catching him naked, my best friend. I'm sorry about last night. You're right. I should help more around the house. I almost laughed. If only he knew what he should actually be apologizing for. It's fine, Mark. I just needed some air. I moved past him to start the coffee maker, playing the role of the understanding wife. I have some errands to run today. As I busied myself with breakfast preparations, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. Good morning, beautiful. Already missing you. Ryan. My heart did a little flip as I quickly typed back, missing you too. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? I glanced at Mark, who was scrolling through his own phone, probably texting Ashley. This afternoon, I can meet you for lunch. Perfect. I'll send you an address. Can't wait to hold you again. I saved his number under Rachel, yoga instructor, and deleted our conversation. If Mark ever looked at my phone, he'd see nothing suspicious. Who was that? Mark asked, without looking up from his own screen. Just Sarah, checking if I'm okay. The lie rolled off my tongue effortlessly. It was amazing how quickly I was adapting to this double life. The morning passed in a strange dance of normalcy. Mark showered, probably washing off Ashley's perfume, while I did laundry, carefully separating my clothes from the night before. I'd need to be more strategic about what I wore to see Ryan. After Mark left for work, I drove to the mall and bought new lingerie. Black lace this time, something that would make Ryan's eyes darken with desire. I hid the shopping bag in my trunk, along with a small makeup kit for touch-ups. Ryan had chosen a quiet bistro across town for lunch. When I walked in, he was already seated at a corner table, and the way his face lit up when he saw me made my knees weak. "You look incredible," he said, standing to pull out my chair. Even this simple gesture, Mark hadn't pulled out a chair for me in years, made me feel cherished. "So do you." He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, and I couldn't help but remember how it had felt to peel it off him the night before. We ordered salads we barely touched, too focused on each other to eat. Under the table, Ryan's hand found my knee, his thumb tracing small circles that sent electricity through my entire body. "I couldn't concentrate in my meeting this morning," he admitted, his voice low. "All I could think about was you in my bed, the way you looked when you woke up next to me." "Ryan," I breathed, feeling my cheeks flush. "I booked us a room," he said quietly. "Same hotel, if you want to." I did want to. God, I wanted to so badly it physically ached. 20 minutes later, we were in the elevator, Ryan's hand on the small of my back, both of us trying to maintain composure until the doors closed behind us. The afternoon was even better than our first night together. Ryan was attentive, passionate, making me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Afterward, as we lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, I felt more alive than I had in years. "I have to go," I whispered reluctantly, checking the time on his expensive watch. "Mark will be home soon. When can I see you again?" Ryan asked, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "Tomorrow. I can say I have a work meeting." "Every day, if you'll let me," he said, kissing my collarbone. The drive home was becoming routine, switching between worlds, compartmentalizing my life. I stopped at the grocery store to establish an alibi, buying ingredients for dinner. Mark was already home when I arrived, and to my horror, Ashley was with him. They were sitting at the kitchen table, looking far too comfortable together. "Hey, Lisa." Ashley jumped up to hug me, and I had to force myself not to recoil. "Mark said you guys had a little spat last night. I brought wine to cheer you up. If this story is giving you butterflies, like and subscribe." The irony was suffocating. Here was Ashley, playing the supportive best friend, while she'd been sleeping with my husband. And Mark, acting like the concerned spouse when he'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. "That's so sweet of you," I said, accepting her hug and playing my part perfectly. "You're such a good friend." Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I smiled and laughed at Ashley's stories, complimented her hair, asked about her job, all while knowing she'd been naked in my bed with my husband just yesterday. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with texts from Ryan. Quick messages that made my heart race. "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You're incredible. Sweet dreams. Beautiful." I excused myself to the bathroom to respond, typing with shaking hands. You make me feel so alive. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. When I returned, Mark was refilling wine glasses, and Ashley was talking about her latest dating disaster. The absolute audacity of it made me want to scream. Maybe you need to find someone more mature, I suggested sweetly. Someone who knows what they want. Ashley laughed. You mean like Mark? You're so lucky, Lisa. He's one of the good ones. I caught Mark's eye and smiled lovingly at him. Yes, he's very committed. The evening finally ended, and after Ashley left, Mark tried to initiate intimacy. The thought of his hands on me after they'd been on her made me physically ill. I'm exhausted, I said, turning away. Maybe tomorrow night, but tomorrow night I'd be with Ryan. And the night after that, and every night I could manage it. As I lay in bed next to my cheating husband, I smiled in the darkness. Mark thought he was getting away with his affair, that I was the naive, trusting wife. If only he knew that while he was playing his games, I was living a completely different life. A life where I was wanted, cherished, and thoroughly satisfied. The best part, unlike Mark's messy, emotional affair with my best friend, mine was elegant, discreet, and absolutely intoxicating. Let the games continue. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful deceptions. I had become a master at living two completely different lives, switching between devoted wife and passionate lover with an ease that should have terrified me. But it was getting harder to maintain the balance. Ryan wanted more of my time. Our hotel meetings had evolved from desperate afternoon encounters to elaborate evening dates, dinners at exclusive restaurants across town, wine tastings at private clubs, long drives along the coast in his Mercedes. He was becoming more demanding, more possessive. Come away with me this weekend, he whispered against my neck as we lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets after another incredible afternoon. There's a resort in Napa I want to show you. My heart raced at the thought, but reality crashed back in. I can't. Mark would notice if I disappeared for an entire weekend. Ryan pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes intense. When are you going to stop letting him control your life, Lisa? You deserve so much more than this charade. He was right, but it wasn't that simple. The delicate web I'd woven was becoming increasingly fragile, and I could feel it starting to unravel. The first crack appeared on a Thursday evening. Mark was rummaging through my purse, looking for his car keys that he'd somehow misplaced, when his fingers found something that made my blood freeze. What's this? He held up the hotel keycard from my last meeting with Ryan, one I thought I'd thrown away. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to laugh. Oh, that old thing. Ashley and I grabbed drinks at the Grandview Hotel last week. The bartender gave me his card. Apparently they're looking for event planners for their corporate parties. Mark examined the card more closely. This looks like a room key, not a business card. It's one of those fancy promotional cards, I said, taking it from him and tossing it in the trash. You know how these upscale places try to impress potential clients. He seemed to accept the explanation, but I caught him watching me differently after that. More carefully, more suspiciously. The second crack came when Ashley started getting bolder about her relationship with Mark. I'd catch them exchanging meaningful glances during our dinner gatherings, their fingers brushing when they passed dishes. The chemistry between them was becoming impossible to ignore, and impossible for them to hide. One evening, while Mark was in the shower, I heard Ashley on the phone in our kitchen. "I think we should tell her soon," she was saying in hushed tones. "This is getting too complicated. She's going to find out eventually. And I'd rather it come from us." My heart hammered as I pressed myself against the hallway wall, straining to hear more. "I know you're worried about how she'll react, but Lisa's stronger than you think. And honestly, I think she might be relieved. Their marriage has been dead for years. We'd actually be doing her a favor." And the absolute audacity of it took my breath away. They were planning to present their betrayal as some kind of gift to me, as if destroying my marriage and friendship was an act of kindness. I slipped back to the living room before Mark finished his shower, my mind racing. If they were planning to confess, it would completely disrupt the delicate balance I'd created. My affair with Ryan would be exposed by default. There was no way I could explain away all my absences and mysterious behavior once Mark started paying real attention. That night, I texted Ryan, "We need to talk. Things are getting complicated." We met the next afternoon at our usual suite, but instead of falling into each other's arms, I found myself pacing nervously by the floor-to-ceiling windows. "They're going to tell me," I said without preamble. "Mark and Ashley. They're planning to confess their affair." Ryan loosened his silk tie and poured himself a whiskey from the suite's bar. "Maybe that's for the best. Then you can finally leave him, and we can stop sneaking around." "It's not that simple," I said, turning to face him. "If Mark finds out I've been having an affair too, the divorce will get messy. Really messy. He'll use it against me." Ryan crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. "Let me hire you the best lawyer in the city. We'll make sure you get everything you deserve." The offer was tempting, but something about the possessiveness in his voice made me hesitate. This had started as revenge, as a way to reclaim my power and dignity. But Ryan was talking about our future like it was already decided, like I was already his. "I need time to think," I said, but my words were lost as he kissed me deeply, his hands tangling in my hair. We made love with desperate intensity that afternoon, as if we both sensed that our perfect secret world was about to crumble. Afterward, as we lay breathless and tangled together, my phone started buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Text after text from Mark. "Where are you? Called your office. They said you left early. Ashley's here. She's worried about you too. This isn't like you, Lisa. Call me back." My stomach dropped. I told Mark I was working late on a big project, but apparently he'd checked. The lies were catching up to me. "I have to go," I whispered, but Ryan's arms tightened around me. "Stay," he murmured against my shoulder. "Let him wonder. Let him worry. You don't understand," I said, sitting up and reaching for my clothes. "If he gets suspicious now, before I'm ready." My phone rang, Mark calling. I stared at it, paralyzed. "Don't answer," Ryan said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "I'm tired of sharing you with him, Lisa. Tired of pretending that what we have is just some casual affair." But I was already grabbing my purse, my heart pounding with panic. The careful walls I'd built between my two lives were collapsing, and I could feel myself being crushed between them. "I have to go," I repeated, but Ryan caught my wrist. "When are you going to choose, Lisa? Him or me? This half-life you're living isn't sustainable, and we both know it." He was right, but I wasn't ready for that choice. Not yet. I pulled free and headed for the door, leaving him standing there in nothing but silk boxers, his expression a mixture of desire and frustration. As I drove home in my Honda, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized that my perfect revenge was about to become my downfall. I'd gotten so caught up in the thrill of the affair, the intoxicating feeling of being wanted and desired, that I'd lost sight of the bigger picture. Both Mark and Ryan were becoming possessive, demanding, suspicious, and caught between them. I was running out of places to hide. The game I'd been playing so masterfully was about to end. The only question was whether I'd be the winner or the casualty when the dust settled. I made it home just as Mark was pulling into the driveway, his headlights sweeping across our front yard. My heart was still racing from my confrontation with Ryan, and I quickly checked my reflection in the rearview mirror before getting out of my Honda. "Where were you?" Mark asked immediately, his voice sharper than usual. "I called 3 times. Shopping with Sarah," I lied smoothly, the alibi rolling off my tongue. My phone was on silent in my purse. He studied my face in the porch light, and I could see suspicion flickering in his eyes. "You look different tonight." "Different how?" I unlocked the front door, trying to keep my voice casual while my mind raced. "I don't know, flushed, like you've been running." I forced a laugh. "It's cold outside, Mark. Of course I'm flushed." But as we entered the house, I could feel his eyes on me, analyzing every movement, every word. The hotel keycard incident had clearly planted seeds of doubt, and now they were growing. The next few days passed in a blur of careful deception. I met Ryan twice more, once for lunch at a discreet restaurant across town, and once for what was supposed to be a quick coffee that turned into 3 hours in his hotel suite. Each time, I returned home to Mark's increasingly suspicious glances and pointed questions. "Sarah called looking for you yesterday," he said one evening, not looking up from his laptop. "Said she hadn't seen you in weeks." My blood turned to ice. She must have forgotten. We just went shopping. Funny thing is, she said she's been in Phoenix visiting her sister for the past 2 weeks. The silence stretched between us, heavy and dangerous. I could feel the walls of my carefully constructed double life beginning to crumble. "I must have confused the days," I said finally. You know how busy work has been. Mark closed his laptop with a sharp snap. Lisa, I think we need to talk. But before he could continue, his phone buzzed. Ashley's name flashed on the screen, and I watched his expression change instantly. Guilty, furtive. He declined the call. Who was that? I asked innocently. Nobody important. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, two people drowning in our own deceptions, each suspicious of the other, each hiding the truth. The breaking point came 3 days later. I was supposed to meet Ryan at our usual hotel at 2 o'clock. I told Mark I had a dentist appointment, a lie I'd used successfully before. But as I walked through the hotel lobby, where are you really going, Lisa? Mark's voice was cold, calculated. My steps faltered. I told you, the dentist. I called Dr. Morrison's office. You don't have an appointment today. You haven't had an appointment in 6 months. I panicked. Mark, I can explain. Room 412, right? That's where you've been going, isn't it? The phone went dead. My hands were shaking as I stared at the elevator, realizing with growing horror that Mark knew. Somehow, he'd figured it out. I should have run, should have left the hotel immediately, and tried to salvage what was left of my secret. Instead, some masochistic part of me wanted to see how this played out. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. Ryan was waiting in the hallway outside his room, dressed in his usual impeccable navy suit. But his expression was concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, pulling me into his arms. Mark knows, I whispered against his chest. He knows about us. Ryan's body tensed. How much does he know? Everything. He knew the room number, Ryan. He's been watching me. We went into the room, and Ryan immediately poured himself a whiskey from the minibar. Maybe it's time, he said quietly. Maybe this is how it was supposed to happen. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time for you to choose. Him or me. No more games, no more lies. Before I could respond, there was a violent pounding on the door. Lisa, I know you're in there. Mark's voice was raw with rage. Ryan and I looked at each other, and I saw something shift in his expression, a hardening, a resolve. Let him in, Ryan said calmly, loosening his silk tie. Ryan, no, but he was already walking to the door. When he opened it, Mark burst in like a man possessed, his face flushed with fury. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Ashley in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock. You bastard, Mark snarled, lunging toward Ryan. You're sleeping with my wife. Ryan didn't flinch. In fact, he stepped protectively in front of me. Your wife came to me, Mark. Maybe you should ask yourself why. How dare you? Mark's voice cracked. She's my wife. Really? I finally found my voice, stepping out from behind Ryan. Your wife. The same wife you've been cheating on for months with Ashley. The room went dead silent. Ashley appeared in the doorway, her face pale as Egyptian cotton sheets. Lisa, we can explain, Ashley started. Explain. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Explain how my husband and my best friend have been screwing behind my back, how you've been planning to tell me as if it's some kind of favor. Mark's anger faltered, replaced by confusion. How did you? I heard you two planning it. Talking about how telling me would be doing me a favor, how my marriage was dead anyway. Ryan turned to look at me, his expression changing. You're married to him, actually married. The weight of that question hit me. In all our intimate conversations, all our passionate encounters, I'd somehow never made it clear that Mark and I were still legally married, still living together, still maintaining the facade. Ryan, I started. Jesus Christ, Lisa. He ran his hands through his hair. I thought you were separated. I thought you were getting divorced. She's been lying to all of us, Mark said, his voice bitter, playing games, manipulating everyone. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare act like the victim. Here when you've been cheating on me for months. At least, I wasn't planning to leave you for someone else. Mark shot back. At least Ashley and I love each other. The words hit like physical blows. Ryan's face had gone cold, professional, the same expression he probably wore in hostile business meetings. Is that true, Lisa? Ryan's voice was quiet, dangerous. Have you been using me to get back at your husband? I looked between the three of them, Mark furious and betrayed, Ashley crying in the doorway, Ryan distant and calculating. The truth was so much more complicated than any of them understood. It started that way, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But it became something else, something real. Bullshit, Ryan said flatly. You've been playing a game. And I was just another piece on the board. The hotel room felt like it was closing in on me. 3 people I'd been deceiving in different ways, all staring at me with varying degrees of hurt and anger. Have you ever been in a complicated situation like this? I asked desperately, looking at each of their faces. Tell me in the comments, because I honestly don't know how to fix this mess I've created. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew there might not be any fixing it. Some lines, once crossed, leave you stranded on the other side with no way back. The silence after my admission stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Ryan's jaw was set in that cold, businesslike way I'd come to recognize. The same expression he probably wore when cutting ties with failing partnerships. Get out, he said quietly, his voice devoid of the warmth that had drawn me to him. Both of you, get out of my room. Mark grabbed my arm roughly. Come on, Lisa. We're going home to talk about this properly. I yanked away from his grip. Don't touch me. You lost that right the moment you started sleeping with Ashley. At least I'm not abandoning my marriage for some rich stranger. Mark's face was red with fury and humiliation. Ryan's laugh was bitter. Rich stranger. Is that what you told him about me, Lisa? Another lie to add to your collection. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. I had compartmentalized everything so completely that even I was losing track of what was real anymore. Ryan, please, I started, but he was already moving toward his suitcase, methodically packing his expensive shirts and ties. Save it. I've heard enough lies for one evening. He didn't even look at me. I thought we had something genuine. I thought you were different from my ex-wife. Turns out you're just another woman who uses people to get what she wants. At the comparison to his ex-wife, the one who cheated with his business partner, was like a knife to the chest. I could see the walls going up around him, the same protective barriers he'd built after his last betrayal. Ashley finally found her voice from the doorway. Lisa, we need to talk. All of us, like adults. Adults. I whirled on her. Adults don't sleep with their best friend's husband behind her back for months. And adults don't have revenge affairs. She shot back, tears streaming down her face. You think this is all some game, but Mark and we love each other. This isn't just sex for us. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I still loved Mark. That feeling had died long before I met Ryan. But because it confirmed what I'd suspected. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. How long? I asked quietly. How long have you been planning to leave me for her, Mark? Mark's silence was answer enough. Ryan paused in his packing, watching this domestic drama unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a car crash. 6 months, Ashley whispered. We were going to tell you next week. We thought it would be kinder to let you know together. Kinder. The laugh that escaped me sounded hysterical, even to my own ears. You thought destroying my marriage and my best friendship would be kinder if you did it together. Ryan zipped his suitcase with finality. I'm checking out. Lisa, don't contact me again. I need time to figure out what was real and what was just. Whatever this was, he walked past me toward the door, and I caught his arm desperately. Ryan, wait, please. You have to understand, my marriage was already over. It had been over for years before I met you. He looked down at where my hand gripped his expensive suit jacket. Then, why didn't you leave him? Why the elaborate charade? Why make me complicit in your deception? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because the truth was complicated and messy and didn't fit into neat explanations. Because I'd been scared and angry and lost, and he'd been my lifeline in a sea of loneliness I'd been drowning in for years. That's what I thought, Ryan said when I remained silent. He gently removed my hand from his arm. Goodbye, Lisa. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Mark and Ashley stood there awkwardly, probably expecting me to break down or scream or throw something. Instead, I felt oddly calm, like a fever finally breaking. I want you both out of my house by tomorrow, I said quietly. Mark, call your lawyer. I'll call mine. We'll divide everything down the middle and be done with this. Lisa, you don't mean that, Mark started. We can work through this. Go to counseling. Fix our marriage. Fix what marriage? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've been planning to leave me for 6 months. You and my best friend have been having elaborate conversations about my life behind my back. What exactly is there to fix? Ashley stepped forward tentatively. I know you hate me right now, but someday I hope you'll understand. Mark and we didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. Love isn't always convenient or neat. Don't, I warned her. Don't you dare romanticize what you've done. You want him. Take him. But don't pretend this was some grand love story. You destroyed a marriage and a friendship because you were selfish and wanted something that wasn't yours. But the drive home was silent. Mark kept glancing at me like he expected me to explode, but I felt strangely empty, like I'd used up all my emotions in that hotel room and had nothing left to give. Our house, soon to be just his house, I supposed, looked different when we pulled into the driveway. Smaller somehow, less significant. I realized I'd been viewing it as a prison for so long that the prospect of leaving felt more like liberation than loss. Where will you go? Mark asked as we stood in our living room, surrounded by the detritus of our failed marriage. I'll figure it out. I pulled off my wedding ring and set it on the coffee table between us. I'll stay at a hotel until I find an apartment. Lisa, we don't have to do this. We can work through it. Both of us made mistakes. I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to remember when I'd stopped loving him. It hadn't been sudden. It had been a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone. The late nights at work that weren't really work. The way he'd stopped noticing me, stopped seeing me as anything more than a roommate who happened to share his bed. No, I said finally. We can't work through this, because this isn't about the affairs, Mark. This is about the fact that we stopped being married a long time ago. We just forgot to sign the papers. And he stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment he realized I was right. That we'd been going through the motions for years, too comfortable and too scared to admit our marriage had died somewhere along the way. I'll pack some things, I said. We can work out the details later. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my former bedroom, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Yes, I'd lost everything tonight. My marriage, my best friend, and Ryan. But maybe losing everything was exactly what I needed to finally figure out who I was when I wasn't defined by other people's expectations. I packed methodically, choosing only the things that felt truly mine. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I wondered if Ryan was doing the same thing in some other hotel room, trying to sort through the wreckage of what we'd built together. The thought of never seeing him again made my chest tight, but I pushed it away. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once shattered, can't be glued back together. I was about to find out who Lisa was when she stood completely alone. 3 months later, I was living in a small apartment downtown that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The divorce papers were signed. The lawyers had divided everything with cold efficiency, and I'd started working at a marketing firm where nobody knew my story. I'd become exactly what I'd wondered about that night, Lisa, standing completely alone. Most days, I liked who I was becoming. I bought groceries for one, decorated walls with art I actually enjoyed, and wore clothes that made me feel confident rather than invisible. The apartment was tiny compared to the house Mark and I had shared, but every corner was mine. Then came the morning I couldn't keep my coffee down. I stared at the ceramic mug, one I'd bought specifically because it was nothing like the matching set Mark had insisted we register for. As it sat abandoned on my kitchen counter, the smell alone had sent me rushing to the bathroom, dry, heaving over the toilet like I had the flu, except I didn't have the flu. I'd been tired for weeks, falling asleep on my couch by 9 o'clock despite never being an early-to-bed person. My breasts felt tender, and I'd been craving pickles and ice cream like some ridiculous pregnancy cliché. The word hung in the air of my small bathroom like an accusation. Pregnant. I sat on the edge of my bathtub, counting backwards on my fingers with the desperate mathematics of a woman who didn't want to face reality. My last period had been when, before the hotel confrontation with Mark and Ryan. After, the timeline blurred together, those final weeks of my marriage lost in a haze of deception and heartbreak, which meant the father could be either of them. The thought made me physically ill in a way that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Mark, who I'd barely touched in the months before our marriage imploded, except for those few times when guilt or routine had brought us together in our cold, distant bed, or Ryan, whose touch had awakened something in me I'd forgotten existed, whose hands had mapped every inch of my body with a reverence that still made me ache 3 months later. I'd thrown away the pregnancy tests I'd bought twice now, too terrified to confirm what my body was already telling me. But sitting there in my bathroom, surrounded by the silence of my new life, I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. The walk to the pharmacy felt like a death march. I bought 3 different tests, plus some random items I didn't need: toothpaste, shampoo, a candy bar, anything to make the purchase feel normal. The teenage cashier barely looked at me, but I felt like everyone in the store could see my secret written across my forehead. Back in my apartment, I lined up the tests on my bathroom counter like some kind of scientific experiment. 3 minutes. That's all it would take to know if my carefully reconstructed life was about to explode again. I couldn't look. I paced my living room, straightened books that didn't need straightening, wiped down surfaces that were already clean. When my phone timer went off, I stood frozen in my kitchen, staring at the bathroom door like it might bite me. The first test showed 2 pink lines, clear as day. The second one had a digital display that simply read, "Pregnant." The third confirmed what the others had already told me. I sank onto my bathroom floor, back against the door, and stared at the evidence of how completely my life was about to change again. 6 months ago, I'd been a married woman going through the motions of a dead relationship. 3 months ago, I'd lost everything in one devastating night. And now I was going to be a mother. The tears came then, a mixture of terror and something that might have been joy if I squinted at it right. I'd always wanted children back when Mark and I were young and still believed in forever, but he'd always found reasons to wait. His career, our finances, the timing never being quite right. Eventually, I'd stopped bringing it up. Another dream filed away with all the others. But whose child was I carrying? The question haunted me as I sat on my bathroom floor. If it was Mark's, it would complicate the divorce proceedings that were finally, mercifully, almost finished. He'd have rights. We'd be connected forever through this child. And Ashley would somehow become part of my baby's life. The thought made my stomach turn. If it was Ryan's, I didn't even know where to begin with that possibility. He'd made it clear that night in the hotel that he was done with me, that the lies and deception had poisoned whatever we'd built together. I hadn't spoken to him since, though I'd drafted 1,000 texts I never sent, explanations and apologies that seemed inadequate in the face of his betrayal. Would he even want to know? Would he care? I picked up my phone, Ryan's contact still saved under his real name. I deleted the fake one the day after everything fell apart. My finger hovered over his number, and I could almost hear his voice, feel his hands on my skin, remember the way he'd looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. But I also remembered the disgust in his eyes that final night, the way he'd gathered his clothes and walked out without looking back. Some bridges, I'd told myself then, couldn't be rebuilt. Maybe this bridge could be, or maybe I'd end up raising this child completely alone, which terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I'd spent so many years being defined by other people. Mark's wife, Ashley's best friend, Ryan's secret. Maybe being someone's mother would finally show me who I really was. I stood up, legs shaky, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same face, same eyes, but everything had changed in the space of 3 minutes. There was a life growing inside me, a tiny cluster of cells that would become a person who would call me Mom. The thought was overwhelming and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. I had decisions to make, huge, life-altering decisions that would affect not just me, but this child I was carrying. Did I tell Ryan? Did I tell Mark? Did I wait and see which one this baby resembled? Or did I demand paternity tests that would turn an already complicated situation into a legal nightmare? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, because sometimes life doesn't wait for you to have everything figured out before it changes everything. I walked to my kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. Caffeine was bad for the baby. I'd have to remember that, and sat at my small dining table with my hands wrapped around the warm mug. Outside my window, the city moved on, oblivious to the fact that my world had just shifted on its axis again. I was going to be a mother, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even if I had no idea what came next. 3 weeks passed before I worked up the courage to make the calls. 3 weeks of morning sickness, that confirmed what those pink lines had told me. 3 weeks of lying awake at night wondering if I was carrying Mark's child or Ryan's. 3 weeks of staring at my phone and deleting half-written messages to both of them. I decided to call Ryan first. Maybe because he'd always been the one who made me feel brave. Or maybe because I was terrified that if I called Mark first, I'd lose my nerve entirely. Lisa, his voice was cautious when he answered, professional and distant in a way that made my chest ache. Ryan, I need to see you. There's something we need to discuss. A long pause. I thought we said everything that needed to be said. Please, the word came out smaller than I intended. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. Another pause, then a sigh. The Meridian Hotel, same suite, 7 tonight. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision I'd ever make. I spent the afternoon getting ready, choosing a simple black dress that didn't show my barely there bump, but somehow made me feel stronger. I applied my makeup carefully, hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. Whatever happened tonight, I was going to face it head on. The hotel lobby felt like stepping back in time. Same marble floors, same crystal chandeliers, same nervous energy thrumming through my veins as I rode the elevator to Ryan's floor. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't running from anything. I was running towards something. Ryan opened the door before I could knock, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. His tie loosened just enough to show the hollow of his throat. His dark eyes searched my face, and I saw the exact moment he noticed something had changed. You look different, he said, stepping aside to let me in. Different how? I don't know. Softer maybe, or glowing. He closed the door behind me, and we stood there in the entryway, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. I walked to the windows overlooking the city, the same windows where we'd shared whiskey and confessions, what felt like a lifetime ago. Ryan, I'm pregnant. The silence stretched so long, I finally turned around. He was standing exactly where I'd left him, his face unreadable. How far along? His voice was steady, controlled. About 6 weeks. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Which means it could be mine or Mark's. He finished the thought I couldn't say out loud. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Ryan moved then, crossing the room in 3 long strides until he was standing in front of me. His hands came up to cup my face, brushing across my cheekbones. Lisa, look at me. When I met his eyes, they were softer than I'd seen them since that terrible night when everything fell apart. I need you to know something. What we had, what we have. It wasn't just revenge or rebellion, or whatever you might think it was. I fell in love with you. Real, honest to God, change my whole world love. My breath caught. Ryan, I'm not finished. His thumb traced my lower lip. If this baby is mine, I want to be its father. Not just biologically. I want to be there for midnight feedings and first steps and scraped knees and graduation day. I want all of it. And if it's not yours, his smile was soft, almost sad. Then I want to be the man who loves its mother so much that it doesn't matter. If you'll have me, tears I'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. You can't mean that. Try me. He pulled me against his chest, and I breathed in his familiar scent, expensive cologne, and something uniquely him. I've spent 3 months trying to forget you, Lisa. It's not working. You're under my skin, in my blood, wrapped around my heart so tight, I can't breathe without thinking about you. I pulled back to look at him. I have to tell Mark. I know. He brushed a tear from my cheek, and whatever his reaction is, whatever he demands or threatens or promises, I want you to remember that you have choices. You're not trapped by anyone else's timeline or expectations anymore. The conversation with Mark went exactly as badly as I'd expected. I met him at a coffee shop near his office, neutral territory where he couldn't make a scene. Ashley wasn't with him, which I took as either a good sign or a very bad one. Pregnant. His voice cracked on the word, drawing stares from nearby tables. How is that even possible? We haven't. I mean, not in months. Exactly. I kept my voice level, matter of fact, which means it's not yours. His face cycled through confusion, realization, and finally rage. That bastard, that goddamn bastard got you pregnant. Keep your voice down, I hissed, glancing around at the other customers. Don't tell me to keep my voice down. My wife is pregnant with another man's baby. Ex-wife, I corrected. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago, remember? Mark slumped back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. Jesus, Lisa, what are you going to do? I'm going to have this baby, and I'm going to raise it with someone who actually wants to be a father. You mean him, Ryan. I mean someone who won't cheat on me with my best friend for 6 months, and then act like I'm the one who destroyed our marriage. Mark flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not. Ashley and we didn't mean for it to happen, but it did happen. For 6 months, Mark. 6 months of lies and sneaking around and planning your future together while I ate dinner and did your laundry and pretended everything was fine. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the whole conversation. I have to go. I have a doctor's appointment. Lisa, wait. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. What if the baby is mine after all? What if the timing is off? Or then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Mark, I looked down at him. This man I'd once promised to love forever, and felt nothing but pity. Even if this baby is biologically yours, Ryan will be its father, because he's the one who wants to be there. I left him sitting there and walked out into the afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from Ashley. Mark told me, "Congratulations, I guess. Hope you're happy." I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. That night, Ryan came to my apartment with Thai takeout and sparkling cider. We ate sitting on my couch, talking about baby names and nursery colors, and all the beautiful, ordinary things I'd never imagined discussing with him. "So what happens now?" I asked as he cleared away our empty containers. "Now," he sat back down beside me, pulling me against his side. "Now we figure it out together, one day at a time." And I pressed my hand to my still flat stomach, imagining the life growing there. I never thought I'd be here. Single, pregnant, starting over at 25. "Hey," Ryan tilted my chin up to meet his eyes. "You're not single. Not unless you want to be." I smiled, feeling something click into place in my chest. "No, I definitely don't want to be single." "Good." He kissed me softly. A promise and a beginning, all wrapped up in one perfect moment. "Because I'm not going anywhere, Lisa. Not this time."